Stacey Dooley is one of Britain's best-loved documentary presenters. In the 10 years she's been making films, she's covered a huge range of topics. Everything from sex trafficking in Cambodia to Yazidi women fighting back. I'm lucky enough to be Stacey's editor on a forthcoming book, On the Front Line with the Women Who Fight Back. And today we're here in Stacey's hometown of Brighton to ask her some questions about the book. Okay, so Stacey, usually you're the one asking people questions about what they're up to. Yeah, exactly. And today we're here to talk to you about an exciting new project, which is your book.
The book.
On the Front Line with the Women Who Fight Back.
It's properly crazy that this is sat here. It feels very surreal. It's exciting.
So can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to kind of finally write this after so many years of making documentaries?
Yes, so we were and R in actually for a couple of years in terms of whether or not we were going to put this into a book, and it just felt like this year was probably the right time. So I started the documentaries when I was 20, turned 30 in March, and so it was like a decade of having spent time with these amazing women. We've been in so many different circumstances, we've been travelling all over the world, and so there was a lot to say. So 10 years down the line, yes. And with all the incredible people that you've encountered and that you've met, how did you get your start in making documentaries? So my career has developed very organically, I suppose. You know, the route I took was very unorthodox. I was just a contributor in a series called Blood, Sweat and T-Shirts 10 years ago, and the premise was really straightforward. You know, they were taking 6 British consumers, they took us to India and showed us where our high street garments were made, and it just all sort of materialised from there, really. The guy who was in charge of the channel at the time called me in and said, oh, you know, I found you really inquisitive, and you know, you seem to have natural empathy, and you know, you're quite nosy, so you know that will probably work quite well. Would you like your own series? And so, honest to God, it was as natural as that. And as I said, I was working at Luton Airport at the time, so it was like this complete shift, and I was suddenly surrounded with loads of kind of highbrow, middle-aged, middle-class men covering these current affairs-y issues. So a real touch. Yeah, very, very, very lucky.
So something exciting to bring a new perspective to.
Yeah. I think everyone's like, what the hell is she doing here? Like, who on earth is she? But I'm still hanging on for dear life. Yeah.
And what advice would you give to kind of other young women who wanted to follow in your footsteps and get into documentary making and reporting?
I think you just have to believe in what you do, and I think that's right across the board. That's not sort of exclusive to making documentaries, but as long as there's that passion and you've that real appetite to understand what the situation is and report what's going on, I think you can sometimes, especially at the start, feel like you've got to conform and you've got to behave a certain way and talk a certain way and act a certain way. Actually, your USP is that nobody else is you. And so, yeah, just work really bloody hard, be willing to put in the hours, make sure you're finding stories that you really want to talk about, you're invested in, and just push your luck when you need to. You know, there have been so many times where people have said, no, you're not doing that, and I think, that's what you think. Push, 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 push. Believe in yourself as well, even though it's tricky. You know, we all get it, sort of self-doubt creeps in, but you can do it, of course, there's no question.
Is there anyone that's inspired you along the way in terms of making documentaries and in journalism? Definitely.
I mean, there's so many amazing reporters out there. Orla Go, you know, every time I see her, like News at 10, I think, where on earth is she now? Like, she's just so incredibly brave and she's so inspirational. I was in Iraq last month, and I was working with a fixer who had been working with her actually, and he was saying she's fucking nuts. Like, there's nowhere she won't go, there's no story she's too frightened to cover. She's been down the tunnels in Syria, you know, the ISIS tunnels. She's just relentless, and the fact that, you know, she's a woman and she's kind of one of a kind is, you know, a credit to her. I also love Louis Theroux. You know, he's such a complete genius and a real gent as well. I met him briefly at the BAFTAs, and it was so cringe. Like, you know, when you meet someone that you sort of really love, but you don't want to act like you do.
So you played it cool.
A bit like that, but it was really awkward, and I just couldn't cope. But he's just, yeah. I think anyone who makes documentaries is kind of King Louis, isn't it? He's the one we all look up to.
Absolutely. One thing that really emerges from your documentaries is your incredible ability to connect with people and the subjects you're interviewing. How tough is it when you finish filming to leave all of that behind?
It's tricky, because as you say, you spend such a decent amount of time with these people, and they invite you inside their houses, and sometimes, the very poignant moments, there's grief, or something huge has happened in their lives, and that's probably the reason that you're there. And really and truly, I'd imagine that kind of a normal, regular individual will only allow the cameras into their lives probably once. So you've got to make sure that it's a really comfortable, hello Bernie, it's a really comfortable, calm experience for them. So there's a real sense of responsibility with the contributors, especially if a lot of the girls, they come from quite chaotic environments, or they've got a lot going on elsewhere. But yeah, you work really hard, you make sure that they feel happy, they've been given this platform, and then you walk away. And sometimes, just naturally, the lines of communication continue, and other times, they want to leave it there. And sometimes as well, it's just like logistics that, sometimes it's really, really difficult to speak to the girls in northern Iraq and Kurdistan, because, they've got a phone 1 minute, and then, they've taken the SIM out and they've sold it to their uncle to, because he's crossing the border. So there's lots of things to take into consideration.
So you meet such an incredible range of people across the documentaries that you film. What is it about the women that you've met in particular, that stand out for you?
Yeah, you're right. I've met so many unbelievable people, you know what I mean? And there are times, especially when you're on location, where you have to remind yourself, this is such a privilege. Like the people that you come across and the stories that they've got to tell you. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was in Iraq. This is a perfect example. And I was sat next to the most amazing a girl called Shireen. She's from the Yazidi community, and we were sat opposite a convicted ISIS prisoner. So both extraordinary, but obviously for very different reasons. But your heart and your loyalties, they lie with the females, because most of the time in these hostile environments, they're always up against it. They're always 3 steps behind the guys. It's like, from the get-go, you're fighting an unequal battle. And I just, I feel like this book shows very, very clearly how awesome women can be, and, their perseverance, and they, despite being up against it, they continue, and yeah, they're so inspirational.
Do you feel that in some small way you're helping them fight back by drawing attention to their causes?
Yeah, you like to think so, don't you? I mean, I'm under no illusion that I'm going to kind of, change everything and everyone's going to be aware, and all will be well. But if you're playing a tiny part and you're bringing it to an audience that wouldn't necessarily know otherwise, that's a touch, and that's what's so rewarding. When people come up to you on the street, and kids, young girls are saying, oh, I didn't know this was an issue, and I watched your doc, and hopefully we'll get that kind of feedback with the book.
You've been to such a huge variety of places, and some really, really terrifying places at that.
Yeah.
Have you ever been scared?
I'm always scared. I'm scared the entire time, and I think that's a misconception. People come up to me and say, oh, you're so brave, I wouldn't have the balls, I don't know how you do it. And actually, probably 95% of the time, I'm panicking or feeling like I'm going to throw up, or thinking, what the hell am I doing here? So actually, writing the book has been very laid back and very chilled, and there's been no guns, and there have been no, IEDs, no one to panic about. It's been pretty chilled. Bag of nerves the entire time.
So you've encountered quite a huge range of people across the films you've made too. So is there any standout person who's kind of inspired you the most?
There have been so many, and I know that's quite a predictable answer, isn't it? But I suppose that's one of the reasons that we wrote the book. It was a kind of a nod to all of the girls, all of the females that have opened up and explained very clearly what their lives are like. I mean, just to name a few, there was a girl in Honduras who we touch on in the book, called Heidi, and essentially, she'd been up against it for a really long time, and she was in a very violent relationship, and her fella was always kicking off, and one day, totally out of the blue really, she'd had enough. She said, I'm off, I'm out of here, I don't need to put up with this. And he took a machete and said, you're not going anywhere, and you can't leave me if you've got no legs. And so he just continues to hack both of her legs off, and just miraculously she survived. So imagine the amount of blood that she'd have lost. She survived, and she was making the most of this chair that her and her family had put together, because the health system's nothing like what we have here. And still, despite all of that, very kind of dignified and very considered and very calm, and able to kind of express very clearly what she was going through. And the Yazidi girls, they've been through the unthinkable, often for years, systematically raped, abused, starved, tortured, beaten, don't know where their folks are, don't know where their sisters are, and still not hard, really tactile, very kind, a sense of humour. And we come from the UK, where we're so comfortable and we're so privileged, and I have no real concerns. And so to have those relationships is such a treat for me personally. Yeah.
So obviously you travel quite a lot. Is there anything in particular, any style of book you like to read when travelling, or kind of what's your routine?
I'm actually very, very dull. I don't really read anything too hardcore or too highbrow when I'm away. It's sort of total escapism. So like Elle Decoration, Elle Magazine, Vogue Magazine, Grazia, like all the kind of, just frivolous fun, the beautiful images. It's just, a sense of relief, especially if film is sort of 16, 18 hours a day, and you're so knackered, but you've got to lie in the bed. You don't want to go straight to sleep, because it's been, what you've been talking about is quite relentless. So you need sort of 15, 20 minutes to kind of shake it off and kind of, zen. So that's my reading. Yeah.
So if you could interview anyone,
yes,
who would it be and why?
Do you know, people always ask me this, and I feel like I should say someone like really rock and roll, or kind of, the most famous person in the world. Like, I feel like everyone says Obama. I met Obama for like 30 seconds. But actually, I'm at my happiest when I'm speaking to kind of normal, unremarkable people, because I just think that's where the most interesting stories are. And, as I said earlier, it's such a treat, and I'm so grateful. I never take it for granted that they allow us in their homes, and we sit on their sofa, we have a cup of tea, and I love interviewing ordinary people, because I think they've always got extraordinary things to say.